The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber has an operating cost of $130,000 to $150,000 per flight hour, making it one of the most strategically valuable assets in the U.S. Air Force. This aircraft is only deployed when all other strike options have failed. Piloting the B-2 are two elite aviators, hand-picked from among the best pilots in the U.S. Air Force. On this particular day, the B-2 was tasked with an unprecedented mission, executed in complete silence, leaving behind no trace, no warning, only shock and devastation. At 11 p.m. on June 20, 2025, at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, a B-2 Spirit bomber belonging to the 11th Stryker Squadron was undergoing final checks by its technical team, preparing for one of the most complex long-range strike missions in modern history. This aircraft was one of 7 stealth bombers launching from Whiteman as part of Operation Midnight Hammer. The mission's objective? A preemptive strike on hardened and fortified Iranian facilities. In the operations briefing room, the two primary pilots sat down to a simple late-night meal, a few slices of cold pizza and some fries. It wasn't an ideal nutritional choice, but it had become something of an informal tradition, a way to relax and mentally prepare before undertaking a long-duration mission. These flights often last over 24 hours, and this casual meal had become a small but meaningful part of their pre-mission routine. For this operation, each B-2 flight crew included a female pilot. Although female aviators are no longer uncommon in modern air forces, their presence still carries powerful symbolic weight. It represents not only the increasing gender diversity within military structures, but also reflects a broader truth. In today's world, even the most complex military operations are no longer limited by gender, but are governed solely by capability and merit. Once the two pilots were seated, the cockpit door was sealed and the automatic pressurization and sealing system activated, creating a completely enclosed cabin environment. The lead pilot, seated on the left, was responsible for flying the aircraft. On the right, the mission commander monitored operational progress, coordinating weapon systems and navigation. The mission commander then activated the main power supply, drawing energy from the battery and auxiliary power unit. Control panels lit up. The cabin lighting, pressurization systems, and internal crew communication devices powered on simultaneously. One by one, the amber warning lights turned off, indicating that all systems were operating normally and ready for launch. The cockpit fell into silence, with only the soft hum of the ventilation system and the occasional click of switches filling the air. The primary pilot initiated the inertial navigation system calibration, synchronizing it with the military-grade GPS signal. Navigation data soon stabilized on the multifunction display screens, confirming a successful satellite lock. With GPS signal locked and steady, the guidance system was ready to import terrain data. At this point, the B-2 Spirit had completed its initial navigation configuration and was prepared to receive the full flight mission package. Seated on the right, the mission commander began entering digital terrain maps and mission coordinates. The target? 35.5 degrees north latitude, between 23 degrees and 24 degrees east longitude, the location of the first in-air refueling waypoint for the operation. On the central control display, a sequence of encrypted waypoints appeared one after another, mapping out the primary flight path, alternate routes, and approach corridors toward the target. At the same time, both pilots began verifying the flight control systems. Because the B-2 Spirit uses a flying wing design, with no conventional tail, rudder, or vertical stabilizers, all control surfaces are managed through a fly-by-wire system. The primary pilot gently moved the control stick left and right, testing the aircraft's aerodynamic response. The multifunction display immediately reflected real-time feedback. Roll inputs were accurate. The elevators and spoilers responded precisely, All of this occurred in near silence, a result of the B-2's fully electronic flight control architecture. The crew then proceeded to the engine startup phase. The B-2 Spirit is equipped with 4 F-118 GE-100 turbofan engines, which are deeply embedded inside the wing structure to minimize infrared signature and radar visibility. These engines operate without afterburners, ensuring stable, low-noise performance throughout the extended mission duration. The engine startup sequence proceeded in order, engines 1 through 4. The pilots closely monitored critical parameters on the instrument panel, including exhaust gas temperature, oil pressure, RPM, and fuel flow, to ensure that all readings remain within safe operational limits. Once all 4 engines were confirmed to be running smoothly, the mission commander verified engines 1, 2, 3, and 4 stable, RPM nominal, systems green. Next, the crew conducted a weapons bay check. The 2 bomb bay doors beneath the fuselage briefly opened for a few seconds, allowing electronic sensors to verify the mechanical status and confirm the presence and integrity of the internal payload. A prompt appeared on the head-up display, HUD. 2 GBU-57A/B massive ordnance penetrators detected, each weighing 30,000 pounds. The pilots confirmed that both bunker-busting bombs were securely locked inside the weapons bay, with fusing systems set to safe and detonation timers pre-programmed. At this point, the weapon system was in standby mode, ready to switch into combat-ready status the moment a strike order was received. Meanwhile, other support systems began powering up in sequence.
The environmental control system was activated to simultaneously regulate both the cockpit interior and the aircraft's external climate conditions. The surface temperature of the radar-absorbent material coating was maintained between 65 to 70 degrees Celsius, ensuring maximum radar wave absorption capability. Relative humidity was kept below 30% to prevent condensation from affecting sensitive electronic microcircuits. With the stealth systems now fully operational, the aircraft was ready to taxi. The pilots activated the complete stealth configuration. Primary radar systems were shut down. All external navigation lights were turned off. All electromagnetic emission devices switched to passive mode, capable only of receiving signals without transmitting. At this point, the B-2 entered full stealth mode, ready to taxi to the runway and begin its strike mission.
The B-2 bomber, now in full stealth mode, had its pilots complete all final pre-takeoff procedures. They checked the brakes, released the throttles, and advanced to maximum power settings. The 4 F-118 GE-100 turbofan engines let out a deep and steady hum. Then, in the darkness, the aircraft began accelerating slowly down runway 24L. The only guidance from the ground came from the faint yellow lights of the control tower, the last signal it would receive from Earth. At 300 kilometers per hour, about 186 miles per hour, the pilot pulled back on the control stick. The aircraft lifted off silently, without triggering any warning systems. At 12:01 a.m. on June 21, 2025, this $2.1 billion invisible steel behemoth took to the sky, smoothly and silently.
After reaching a safe altitude, the landing gear was retracted and the aircraft maintained a climb attitude of approximately 14 degrees, entering its initial ascent phase. At 3,000 feet, the autopilot system took over control. Upon reaching 10,000 feet, the pressurization and oxygen supply systems were activated, ensuring a stable cabin environment. After receiving its mission command, the B-2 bomber climbed to a flight altitude of 50,000 feet on a heading of 095 degrees. At this point, it was still 2,435 nautical miles away from the refueling aircraft. The B-2 continued to ascend to its target altitude of 50,000 feet, cruising eastward across the Atlantic Ocean at a stable speed of 900 to 1,000 kilometers per hour. The first phase of the flight spanned 4,500 kilometers, with the objective of reaching the first aerial refueling point outside the U.S. mainland. From this moment on, the aircraft virtually vanished from the physical world. No signals transmitted, no radar appearance, no trace left behind. About 20 minutes after takeoff, the B-2 had climbed to an altitude of 50,000 feet, or approximately 15,240 meters. This airspace is beyond the reach of ground-based radar, with no transponder signal, no radar reflections, no trace. From this height, it began a long transatlantic journey, stealthy and alone, completely cut off from the world below, preparing to execute a mission that would remain unknown until it was completed. At 11:35 a.m. on June 21, 2025, after taking off from Whiteman Air Force Base, the second B-2 Spirit bomber completed more than 10 hours of flight and finally reached the designated aerial refueling area located in northern Saudi Arabian airspace, near the eastern coast of the Persian Gulf. Several KC-135 and KC-46A aerial tankers had been pre-deployed to the refueling zone.
The aircraft group was circling in a holding pattern, awaiting mid-air refueling, which would be conducted at altitudes between 28,000 and 30,000 feet. The entire airspace was under tactical radio silence, with no electronic signals exposed. The perimeter of the refueling formation was escorted by FA-18E/F Super Hornet fighter jets, which provided air defense and surveillance, ensuring the group remained free from aerial or long-range threats. At the same time, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft were deployed on the edge of the formation, actively emitting multi-band tactical jamming signals, creating a dense electronic shield. The purpose of this shield was to disrupt Iranian and neighboring air defense systems' early warning radars. At this moment, the U.S. Joint Operations Command Center at El Udeid Air Base in Qatar, as well as U.S. European command bases, and the Pentagon's War Room were closely monitoring the entire operation through real-time satellite imagery, signals intelligence (SIGINT), and integrated data from E-3 Sentry AWCS aircraft. Every radar signal, weather shift, or anomaly was processed in real time, enabling the command centers to intervene, adjust, or even abort the strike mission if necessary. After completing aerial refueling over the northern Arabian Peninsula, the B-2 stealth bomber silently detached from the formation and quickly transitioned to solo flight mode. It entered a state of complete electromagnetic silence, emitting no radio signals. From this moment on, only the crew and the operations command center knew its exact location. Flying at nearly 50,000 feet, this stealth aircraft began to cross the western border of Iran. No escort, no radar signature. It glided like a phantom, following a precisely calculated flight path, skirting mountainous regions to avoid all Iranian ground radar scans. Meanwhile, several hundred nautical miles to the south of Iran, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft had already begun tactical jamming, simulating large numbers of virtual targets to create false impressions. The entire plan aimed to disrupt the judgment of Iran's Khatam al-Anbiya air defense headquarters, forcing them to disperse their radar resources. At the same time, E-8 Joint Stars command and control aircraft and E-3 Sentry AWACS in the rear maintained a long-range tactical communication network, ensuring the entire battlefield remained under efficient surveillance and that all variables could be managed in real time.
The B-2 continued forward, penetrating deep into enemy airspace, flying over the Zagros Mountains under the cover of night. When the aircraft was less than 240 kilometers from the first target, the bomb bay began cooling down and was activated for deployment. For this mission, the B-2 was armed with two GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP bombs, guided by GPS and inertial navigation systems. These are the largest bunker-busting bombs ever deployed in combat, weighing 30,000 pounds or approximately 13,600 kilograms each. Each MOP costs up to $15 million, and only the B-2 stealth bomber is capable of carrying and deploying such heavy ordnance. Everything was ready. All that remained was the order to strike. The B-2 was now poised to cross Iranian airspace and head straight for the target.
The B-2 Spirit, cruising at approximately 900 kilometers per hour at an altitude close to 50,000 feet, took just over 20 minutes to cross Iran's western border and enter the most heavily defended and radar-dense airspace in the Middle East. On the radar screens of Iran's Qatam al-Anbiya Air Defense Headquarters, there was nothing. No signals, no warnings. The B-2 was completely invisible. This ghost-like stealth capability was made possible by its radar-absorbing materials and an upgraded stealth coating, which not only significantly reduced maintenance time, but also greatly enhanced its low observable profile. Meanwhile, Iran's multi-layered air defense systems deployed around high-priority targets remained on maximum alert, from Russian-imported S-300 PMU-2 systems to domestically built Code 15 and Top 3E platforms, all were in combat-ready status. Yet none of them were capable of detecting the stealth bomber silently crossing over the Zagros Mountains, now only 160 kilometers from its target. In the darkness and tactical silence, the B-2 pressed forward, undetected, unlocked, as if it had never existed in Iran's skies.
Once the timing was right, the target coordinates were precisely locked using military-grade GPS, confirmed through inertial navigation and satellite data. After a quick wind speed verification, the pilots confirmed that the bombing conditions were optimal. Upon final authorization, the release order was formally issued. The bomb bay doors opened, and a GBU-57A or B Massive Ordnance Penetrator MOP was released from the aircraft. A 6-meter-long, 13.6-ton steel behemoth. It had no propulsion system, relying solely on gravity and kinetic energy to descend. Though it was a free-fall weapon, the destructive power of the GBU-57 far exceeds that of any previous conventional bomb. The GBU-57 plummeted vertically at high speed toward the Fordow nuclear facility, reportedly buried nearly 90 meters underground, shielded by multiple layers of granite and reinforced concrete, and considered one of Iran's most heavily fortified installations. Ready for the next segment when you are.
Less than a minute later, a powerful shockwave radiated from the target zone. The bomb had pierced through dozens of defensive layers and detonated at the core of the uranium enrichment facility. A massive column of black smoke rose into the Iranian night sky. There were no sirens, no surface-to-air missiles launched, no radar alerts. Only seismographs in the region recorded a tremor equivalent to a magnitude 2.1 earthquake on the Richter scale. Once confirmation of target destruction was received, the B-2 immediately turned west-southwest, accelerating along its pre-programmed stealth egress route. All onboard systems switched to rapid retreat and full stealth mode. Ready for the next part whenever you are. At the edge of the combat zone, pre-positioned FA-18E Super Hornet fighters launched rapidly, deploying as reserve forces into the operational area. Their mission? To provide air cover for the B-2's withdrawal route and to intercept any Iranian fighters or drones attempting to pursue or engage. June 21, 2025, 1930. 19 hours after takeoff, the B-2 Spirit finally exited Iranian airspace, entering the secure zone over the Red Sea. There, a KC-46 Pegasus tanker, pre-positioned in advance, rendezvoused with the bomber for a second aerial refueling. ensuring the aircraft had sufficient fuel to cross the remaining intercontinental segment without landing, without pause, and without a single error. The B-2 then continued westward, crossing the Mediterranean and the Atlantic, returning to U.S. soil, completing one of the most ambitious missions in over 2 decades.
After the mission was completed, General Kane extended his sincere gratitude to everyone involved in the operation, from the B-2 pilots, tanker crews, and escort fighter pilots, to the decoy operators and technical support teams behind the scenes. In a brief but powerful statement, he said, "The mission was executed flawlessly." General Kane also revealed that all aircraft involved in Operation Midnight Hammer had safely exited Iranian airspace and returned to their respective bases. No Iranian fighter jets ever managed to take off. No surface-to-air missile systems even detected the presence of U.S. aircraft. This was a military operation carried out in absolute silence, yet it left behind a shock wave loud enough to alert the entire world.